Welcome to Human Risk, a podcast dedicated to the understanding of human behaviour as a risk. Here's your host, Christian Hunt.
Hello and welcome back to the Human Risk podcast. In this series, I talk to people who can help us understand how we can influence human decision making. Now, when I mention the word marketing or creative agency, you'll probably think of people selling washing powder. What you might not think of is getting children to eat more vegetables or stopping men from urinating in train stations. But that's exactly the kind of work my guest this time is involved in. And he works for a company best known for advertising rather than social interventions. Benoît de Fleurian heads up the behavioural science team at Ogilvy Consulting in Paris. He's a colleague of Rory Sutherland, who's been a previous guest of mine. Benoît grabbed my attention because of a presentation he gave at Nudgestock, Ogilvy's annual behavioural science festival, which this year went online for the first time. In that video, he talked about a project he'd been involved in to stop men peeing on the wall of a train station. What he and his team designed was playful, creative, and extremely effective. It particularly appealed to me because it's a perfect compliance case study for human risk. Stopping people from doing something we don't want them to by using behavioural science. For obvious reasons, putting up a sign saying "don't pee here" or even "please don't pee here" is very unlikely to be effective, particularly when you're fighting a basic biological need. The solution he's come up with is a great example of the kind of thinking we need when it comes to managing human risk. I begin by asking Benoît how he became interested in behavioural science. And as ever, there are some fascinating influences, including a movie, which I thoroughly recommend, details in the show notes. We then moved on to talk about a number of the behavioural interventions he's led. Just as the solutions Benoît introduces are playful, so too is our discussion. So please enjoy my conversation with Benoît de Fleurian. Benoît, welcome to the Human Risk podcast.
Thank you to have me today. I'm really very pleased to have a chance to talk about behavioral science, which is a great passion of mine.
Before we dive into some of the really interesting things you're doing, can you talk a little bit about your background? How did you get into behavioral science and why do you find it interesting?
So two things got me to behavioral science. The first one is really when I was a kid. There was a French film which was quite famous at the time by director Costa Gavras. The film is named I Comicar. And it was about the kind of fiction around the assassination of JFK. And in the film, there was the milligram experiment, which was reproduced because the assassinator did the experiment, and of course he was one of the 65% of people who would kill the poor guy who cannot have the right memory. And it was fascinating because it was really at the university. It was a great sequence with Yves Montand. And it's always something that has fascinated me. It's, if you can look at it, it's really a great film sequence. But of course I had forgotten. And I had the occasion, so I was, all my biggest part of my career was in advertising. And my latest position in advertising was to be the MD of the advertising agency for Ogilvy in Paris. And we did really quite lots of fun things, etc. Some of them were starting to touch with behavioral sciences, but we didn't even know that we were touching behavioral science. And one day I said I needed to do something else. I was not so much interested into a management position and all the etc. And I'm really passionate about ideas and the work. And so I said, I would love to really work with big international clients because they have the money and people who really want to innovate because it was the digital revolution. So the opening of new frontiers to do things really, really new. And in fact, we proposed something to Nestlé. They were thinking about celebrating their 150th years anniversary. And we proposed to them to do something a bit crazy, which was to invent a global social movement to help parents evolve and change the eating behaviors of their children. Because if we really want to find a solution about obesity and about malnutrition, we need to change eating behaviors. And they said, yes, we want to do that. Great, etc. So how do we do it? And we said we need to use behavioral sciences because it's about changing behaviors. And we need, of course, to have a great knowledge about nutrition, but Nestlé has tons of people who are really great about nutrition. And because eating behaviors is really so much linked to emotion, and because food is so much a pleasure of life, and it's about kids, etc., it's difficult. So if we really don't come up with lots of creativity and emotion and excitement, we will never succeed. So we proposed a project which was called United for Healthier Kids, and it was a mix of nutritional science, behavioral science, and creativity. And so I discovered the real behavioral science at the moment. We worked with Rory and his team in London because at the start they were the only ones really mastering behavioral science. And then we said, okay, we can do as good as they do. And so we created the practice in Paris. And so it was my discovery with behavioral science, and I loved it.
Fantastic. I love that. And what I always love about that question to people is there's always something that's got nothing to do with work. It's like there was some weird thing that they seen that they wanted to have solved. And I love the fact there's a movie. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes. I think I watched that years ago, but I need to be reminded. So there's my lockdown viewing sorted for this evening. The reason you came to my attention is obviously I was aware of the work Ogilvy was doing, but you did this fabulous video at Nudgestock. And again, for listeners that aren't aware, Nudgestock is a behavioral science festival. And this year it went online for the first time. And Benoît did a video piece from Paris that I just thought was amazing and very French in its approach, which I loved. And you were talking about the challenge of stopping people peeing where you don't want them to pee. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think it's just a brilliant example of a really important but yet quite fun subject to look at.
Well, this is what is really fun with when you start to be interested into behavioral science, is that you get really very surprising, unusual questions from your clients. So this is something, stopping people from peeing on a wall is never something that you never have as a brief when you are an advertising agency. Behavioral science intervention and you have those briefs. And it's really, it's great because it's really it's quite a very important problem with, for SNCF, the French rates, because in fact it's creating, so you have to clean the walls, and so it's costing a lot in terms of people who need to products, etc., that you need to use. It's, of course, it's giving an image which is really not a great image of French rail. You don't want to enter into a station. You have TGVs, etc. It's very modern, but you have a wall which is stinking the pee. It doesn't work together. And it's also, of course, the people who are working there. They are, and in Les Mureaux, it was really the case. Every day when they come into the office, they enter through a door which is really stinking urine. So it's these kind of problems that appear a bit small but in fact it's really important problem. And what is interesting is it's problems which really touch the life of people. And when you solve it, in fact, you can really have an impact which is much more than just solving a problem.
So you're presented with this problem, and presumably this was a sort of thing they were just talking to you about other work and sort of said, can you help solve with this? I presume they didn't go and get lots of people to pitch for solutions. It was just part of a general set of discussions. What was your sort of approach to looking at that? Because I think this is just a fascinating example of something where there's a logical approach and then there's kind of the creative one that you've adopted.
In fact, it's an ideal client to work with, French Rail, because they really believe in behavioral sciences. So they are one of the first, if not the very first, French company with a nudge unit, and they really take behavioral sciences seriously. So they believe in the science. They want people to really use scientific approaches. They want to measure everything that we do, which is really very important, because this is the thing that says whether you have effective solutions or not. So it was, in fact, it was quite easy to win the pitch because we were new only in France. There are not so many agencies that are able to create behavioral interventions. They had heard about us from an academic, a professor at the University of Lyon. So they were curious. So they asked us whether we could work together. And from the very start, with the approach that the methodology that we proposed to them, they were really seduced and they said, yes, we want to work together. And in the methodology, what is, we really, and this is our DNA, we really want to have the most perfect marriage between science and creativity. And we really believe that if we couple the power of behavioral science with the power of the power of creativity, we can really have superior results. And I remember we used a reference in our initial pitch document, which is an intervention that some Indian municipalities are doing in India. And in India, peeing on the wall, it's a national sport. When you are, it's really in the daily life. It's one of the if you pee, you look for a wall and you pee against it. And one village, one city has found a really genius idea. So there is one thing that you really respect in India, it's cows and goats. And so they had this idea to produce types of goats. And so there are hundreds of types because they have hundreds or thousands of goats. So it's really a nice way to decorate a wall. And in fact, they have those tiles with the goats on the wall. And of course, you don't pee in front of your goats, or you're not a good Indian. So this is the kind of thing that we really love. There is science, behavioral science behind this idea, this intervention. You have lots of psychological levers which are really very present here, but at the same time there is a real creative leap, and the creative leap makes the intervention almost natural. It's not like you shouldn't pee on this wall, etc. It's just continuing to celebrate our goats and the diversity of our goats, and we will stick types of goats on our. So it was really brilliant. And when they saw that intervention that they didn't know, they say, yes, we probably found the right partner.
Wow, that's amazing. So you took that idea, and I love this concept, which sort of, on the face of it, you kind of go, you're just stealing ideas from somewhere else. But I think there's something smart about that, which is you go ferret out and say, where has this been done before? And in this case, you're looking at the same activity, but you could just as easily context shift and activity shift and say, look, this worked here. It might be worth trying something. So you borrow liberally from someone else's genius idea, who a sort of accidental behavioral scientist, if you like.
So we didn't borrow because we created something else, but every project that we start, we are really carefully doing a scientific literature analysis, review. So we really want to know everything that has been published on this subject, to know to understand what is working, what is not working, what are the most promising behavioral levers, psychological levers that we can that we can use. We are also doing what we call a lateral review, which is really so it's more our creative minds, and it's more the way that we used to work in advertising. So we look at all the awards in Cannes, etc. So those crazy ideas that have been awarded, so because they were really creative, they don't necessarily are effective, or at least they have not proven that they were really effective. But it's also another kind of inspiration, which is opening our minds. And the other thing which is very important is the ethnography. So we observe things, and we spend days observing people, how they would behave around la Gare des Mureaux, and what we try to do. So at the moment, we haven't succeeded into doing that. But in fact, when you are doing classical ethnography, you are just observing. But in fact, what we are trying to do is to do a bit more than observe, because we want to change things. We want to change behaviors. We want to create accidents that will really provoke a change in behavior. So what I would love to do is to invent a new kind of ethnography. I called it gonzo ethnography. Mm-hmm. So ethnography, when you provoke things, you create scenarios and you see how people react, when they are reacting, when they are not, what they find really strange or usual. And if I think we don't create that level of intervention in the observation, you just observe normal things and you don't observe the things that you really want, that will really create great insights for for us to build ideas on.
And I love that, because so one of the previous guests on my podcast is a guy called Dom Jolly, who did a kind of hidden camera show here in the UK, and it was all about creating surreal situations and to see how people react. And the comedy is in the way they react, or in the case of the UK, often don't react to these really weird things.
Yep.
And for me, there's a fine line, between kind of comedic interventions, because that results on disrupting the norm, and behavioral science, where you're looking and saying, well, we're also trying to disrupt what is an existing norm and see how. So I love that. I love that whole depiction of it as a sort of, it's not just watching what people do. It's playing a little bit with that and kind of getting into the mentality and the mindset and seeing what tweaks you can make. So I think that's a really interesting way of describing it.
Let me give you another example. In fact, what we try to bring, and it's really in our approach, we try always to bring science and creativity together. So even when we are on a scientific mode and we are observing, we try to bring a bit of creativity. So it was for Nestlé in Mexico, and it was this project about United for Healthier Kids. And one of our briefs was to try to reduce the number of occasions of consumption of kids. When you are a Mexican kid, when you are a French kid, you eat 4 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, goûter, what we call goûter, so afternoon snack, and dinner. When you are a Mexican kid, you eat probably between 15 and 20 times a day. So this is probably one of the reasons why they have so many overweighted kids and obese kids. So one of the things we worked on many briefs, but one of them was, can we try to reduce the number of occasions of eating? So we did some ethnography, but in fact, so what we did is that we sent creative teams to do the ethnography. So of course they are not scientists, but they have a creative way, a creative look at what they are observing. And one of the guys came back and they said there is something that really fascinated me. I was watching boys playing football in the break at school, and it's incredible because they know how to play football and eat a pizza at the same time. In one hand, slice of pizza, eat it, and play football. So from that, this is interesting because from that, what we thought, wow, this could be a great brief for finding a creative intervention. Let's invent something which is addictive, so kids will want to play and play again and again, but which makes the 2 hands busy. So in fact, we called it the Rubik's Cube brief. Remember the Rubik's Cube? You need to have your 2 hands. You cannot play with 1 hand, and it's addictive. So if we had another Rubik's Cube in Mexico, so as addictive as the original one, probably we would solve, and probably we could suppress not 1, but 2, 3, maybe 4 occasions of consumption. So this is the kind of when you have creativity and really and science, make something really interesting, produce something really interesting.
And it's the bit I love as well is it's fun, right? And I think you're talking about interventions involving kids, but actually, if I look, we're all big. Anybody listening to this podcast is a kid at heart. Particularly men, obviously, because we seem to love that more. But I just look at it and go, things that work on that level also work the adult brain, and you can take some of those interventions. And I find it really astonishing that if you look at parents, the tricks that parents pull to get their kids to do things.
Yeah,
you can just think in those terms. Now, some of them is terrible, right? Because some of it's bribery, right? Not good. But some of the things are really clever, and you see very clever intervention. And of course, kids are very clever because they play the game as well. But I think that's a really interesting example of sort of thing, that kind of playful thinking, which is perfect for interventions, also works brilliantly when you're trying to intervene as adults that are doing the thing you don't want them to do.
Of course. Well, the most famous example is the fly of Schiphol urinals. It's because all men are still kids and they want to kill the fly and out of the toilets.
Yeah, no, I love that one as well because it combines 2 things, right? One is sort of marksmanship, right, and manliness, and they're sort of the killing of it. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It's one of those really interventions. And so just to come back, because I know listeners will be curious, and I'll put a link to your video so they can watch this thing. But just talk us through the solution to the peeing in Les Mureaux.
So we to be very honest, I don't think it's the most creative idea that we can produce. We have things in our carton which are probably more creative.
We'll come and pick some of those if we can in a minute. But
what I love about Les Mureaux is that it really represents what we want to do with behavioral science. In fact, there is one thing that we would like to do is really, we don't want to be the best at behavioral science. There are people who will know much better about the psychology of change, etc. We don't want to compete here, but we want to be the best in applying behavioral science to real life. So in applied behavioral science. And here, I think there is a big gap. There is not many people who are really trying their best to really think of how can I apply these great learnings, these great insights that the academic world has discovered. I can apply it to real life. And so what we did in Les Mureaux, so there is lots of science, so there is observation and lots of science. It's not complicated science. It's mainly two things. One, which is the broken window theory. So remember, broken window, it was in the 70s, and the theory is that if you start to break the window of a car, whether the car is situated in a bad area of Brooklyn or in a very chic area in Palo Alto, it will end the same way the car will be totally destroyed. Just because there is something which is wrong at the start. And here in Les Mureaux, and this is really a serious discussion we had with French Rail, we said to them, we need really to kill this public urination, because if there are still a bit of acts of urination, it will be finished. If one guy starts to pee, you can be sure that there will be a second and a third one, and then it will start to stink. So families, kids, etc., will avoid the area. So the area will be even more quiet for people to pee, and then there will be stains, etc., and then it's finished. It will be an official toilet for men who in the street. So we had that really very clear in mind. We need to be very extreme in our solutions so that we can really have a chance to have an effective solution. The second thing we said to them is there is something that we read in the literature which is really great. So it's another problem. It's not public urination, but it was in Montreal, and it's a square which was badly frequented. So it was junkies, etc., not people that you want to have in a nice area. And what they did is that, in fact, they renamed the park. It was a square. Now it is a park. It was the name was quite ordinary, and now it's the Parc Émilie Gamelin. So it's kind of chic. It's like if we were in the Parc du Château de Versailles or whatever. And so it was a name, it was a new function. And so because it was a park, they planted some trees, and they made also some giant chessboards so that people can play. And they shifted totally the frequentation of the area, and suddenly families came back. And once families are here, junkies don't think it's a nice place to wander around, and it's finished. So the fact to rename, to give a new function to the area was something we thought, wow, this is really important, and it could work in our case. So in fact, we have reframed. It was for everyone in Les Mureaux. It was a public toilet. And now it will be a stadium for kids to practice and to run. And then it's, there is a kind of gymnastics when you start to really be into behavioral sciences, etc. So when you want to pee, you are a man, you want to have a discrete area where there is no one you can hide from the crowd, and there is no one serving you, and you don't want to hear noises, etc. So it would be really the worst place for someone to pee. It's a place where you have lots of life, when there is kids playing and making maybe fun of you, etc. So we invented this mini stadium for kids, and so to attract kids, more and more in this area. So to really activate social control in the area, to make men think that this is really a place where society is living, where people are here, kids are running, playing, mothers are here. So it's not a place where you can be. And we tried to really make it exciting for kids to run. So we invented a real track with podiums at the start with a meter so that they can measure the speed. And we created kind of a mini Stade de France so that they really think we have the Olympic Games in Paris in 4 years' time. So they need to think, wow, I'm running, it's the final of the Stade de France, etc. And by doing that, we did also something else, which is we had people around, we sticked people on the walls so that they can think that there is public watching them. So when the Stade de France, you have 80,000 people watching you, so it makes it more exciting. But those public, of course, they are placed strategically so that when a man wants to pee, he has the faces of people watching him, and not in the eyes, but under the belly. So you don't want to pee in this kind of. And this is where also it represents a bit the way we like to intervene. When you are an academic, when you are a scientist, you try to measure the effectiveness of your intervention. So you want to have just one single-minded intervention, because if you have 2 or 3 layers of psychological ideas, you don't know which is the one that is working, and you cannot publish, etc. Here we are in real life. So we don't care about which is exactly the psychological layer in your intervention, which is working or not. What you want at the end of the day is that the whole intervention is really working. So we said at the moment there is one expression in France for toilets. We call it les petits coins, the little corners. And in fact, in the streets, it's exactly like that. You are a man, you want to pee. You try to find a corner, because in the corner it's so easy to hide and to be a bit apart from the crowd. So we thought maybe every time there is a corner, there is a danger to attract a candidate to urinate. And so we said, and it's also why we need to have creative mind in front of us. We said, hey guys, can you erase the corners? Can you make flat corners so there is no more corners and there is no more attraction for? And so we created a kind of graphic illusion using different techniques and lots of circles and spheres, etc. So that when you arrive in Les Mureaux, you don't really see the corner, and it attracts less candidates to urinate. So it's that's some addition of many psychological layers, ideas that at the end of the day create also something which is not anymore a nudge. When you go to Les Mureaux, you think, hey, the city of Les Mureaux is really cool. They have this big area in front of the station, and they did something really cool for kids to run, to practice sport, etc. You would never guess this is something that we did for preventing men to urinate on the walls. And this is important because this is also the effectiveness of the nudge. The nudge is designed to talk to the rational part of our brains, the Homer Simpson part of the brain. If you start to activate the rational part of the brain, if you start to spot, hey, this is a nudge and I want to prevent me from doing something, it's finished. You are not in behavioral science. You are in something else, which is, hey, we are. So it's. I think it represents quite well with the way we like to intervene. And maybe the last thing that I will say on Les Mureaux is the measurement. So because we really want to measure, and we want to measure not to be famous and to say, hey, we have won, we are effective, etc. We want to measure because it's the only way to massify the intervention. And my objective and French Railway's objective is not to solve Les Mureaux situation, it's to solve all the French station situation. So we need to have to make really sure that we have succeeded so that it can be deployed in the other stations. And for that, we had to invent a new device, which is a urine detector device. It doesn't exist on the market. How do you measure if people are peeing or not on your wall. So you cannot observe, you cannot put people because they would bias, of course, bring it up.
Are you peeing? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Exactly. And you can have people 24 hours a day because people didn't know that people were peeing. And in fact, we realized at 3:00 in the morning, people were peeing on the walls. So we invented, you cannot put a camera because it's illegal in France, and it could also be a bias because you don't pee in front of a camera. And so we coupled a detector of humidity, so of liquid, coupled with a heat detector so that we can distinct rain and pee. And so that was discreetly put on the wall, so no one knew what it was. And we had the very precise measure of when someone is peeing on the walls. And then we could have really those results, which are really quite astonishing. We didn't think having so great results when we discovered them.
And so it's been a huge success.
Yeah, huge success, and it's so in advertising we go quite quick usually. So it's a bit long to come up to the idea, to test it, etc. But then you air your film, you produce your idea, etc., and it's finished. Here it's not finished because what we have done, we have shown that in Les Mureaux, in two different situations, our intervention is really remarkably effective. But when you go to another station, in fact, it's not the same situation. Maybe what we have done, we have intervened in corners in Les Mureaux, one outside, two inside. But there is a station where people pee under stairs. There is a station where people pee along a very long corridor. So it's all different situations. And what we are doing at the moment with SNCF, we are continuing to, so we are starting to deploy, but we are deploying with still, it's really a kind of ad hoc deployment. So we are still looking at how observing people, observing the situation, starting to be being a bit creative to adapt the principle that we have proved to work in Les Mureaux. And in one case that we are working on at the moment, it's a gare which is called La Gare Magenta, so it's in Paris, but it's an architectural station. So really modern architecture, great lighting, really beautiful spaces, perspective, etc. So you cannot come up with stickers of racetrack and public, etc. It would be totally stupid. So we kept the strategy, but we are totally reinventing the creative execution of it. And it's really quite cool, in fact, the thing that we are producing at the moment for French web. So there is this phase. When we will have finished this phase, probably it will be another 6 months, 8 months, because we we adapt the solution, we produce, we test. So we continue to use our urine detectors to test everything that we are doing to make sure that it's working. And so probably in 12 months' time, we will have a playbook with all the situations that you can confront to when you are a station, and with a creative solution for each of those situations. And then we will really roll out to all stations in France.
Wow. Part of me is astonished that no one's invented a kind of pee detector. And then you go, well, why would you need one except for doing what you're doing? Yeah. So it probably is kind of logical. So I love the fact that you've produced a product as well as just a solution to a problem.
But I think this is what is lacking at the moment in the market of behavioral science, because so the academics are quite pure about testing things, but the practitioners, the ones who are really applying in the real life behavioral science, are not as rigorous. And this is what is. There is one thing that I really use a lot in my presentations. It's the 3D zebra squares.
Zebra crossing, yeah.
So it's something, you have it everywhere. In India, in France, in UK, in Sweden, in Burma, etc., everywhere. And there is not one single paper on the effectiveness of it. So it's just kind of fashionable to have your 3D square, etc. It's really, it's just for the fun of it, for saying to when you are a mayor, saying to your citizens that you are really cool and avant-garde and etc. And you are, but it's total bullshit. there is not one paper. And in fact, in France, so there was a big fashion in the past 2 years, and we start now to see, not to measure, but to see the results. So we see and all the mayors of France are stopping the experiment because it didn't prove any improvement in the security of the and at worst it can create accidents because when you are surprised, etc. So you have traces of cars breaking that very very quickly because they saw something, it was real, etc. They thought it was an obstacle, and so it can create accidents. So this is what we are fighting for, which is really, let's take applied behavioral sciences really seriously.
And I think that's interesting because the zebra crossing thing, so there's one near me in London, and the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, and I kind of slowed down.
Yeah.
Then you realize it's not that, there's, and they do the same with speed bumps as well. And then you realize that actually that this is fake. And you see it for what it is. So the optical illusion disappears once you started to recognize it. Yeah. And so now I know that all these speed bumps and it's just an optical illusion. So I can kind of ignore it. I'll just continue doing what I'm doing. So the only people that react to it is people that aren't there locally. But who is driving there most frequently? The answer is the people that live nearby. So any of these interventions lose their effectiveness because they wear off over time. And as you say, you then get this tension of somebody that's not from the area is behaving massively differently from someone that is from the area. And so one of the challenges in traffic is you need to have a rough idea as to what other people are going to do. Well, and if you don't have that rough idea and you presume they're going to do it, so I would argue with that, it's kind of obvious. And I think you're absolutely right. You see so many interventions where you go, it's not a sort of genius thing because we hadn't realized that it's a pretty obvious basic piece that you could have thought about. And as you say, a little bit of testing around it would lead you to go, oh, that initial hypothesis is now confirmed, not such a smart idea.
And it's even worse than what you say, because in your case, when you have discovered that it's just optical illusion, I'm sure that you are pissed off against your mayor, etc., because they tried to cheat on you. They try to manipulate you. This is what there is always once you have a big meeting on behavioral science, there are always questions about manipulation, etc. And this is what I don't like about those kind of nudges. It's manipulation, and it's look at all the you have studies on that. All the EasyJet, the Hotel.coms, etc., who are overusing nudges to try to sell you more, etc. At the moment, there is they have harmed their brands. There is a real, first, people don't believe to what they see on the screens, so it's not effective at all. But there is a counter effect, which is, I don't trust anymore this brand, which is trying to cheat on me. And I think you need to, when we do Les Mureaux with SNCF, nobody, even if there is an intent, which is that nobody can tell us, guys, you tried to manipulate me. And I think this is important.
No, and you're absolutely right, because there is a sort of irritation factor.
Yeah.
And that turns me angry. And I'm probably, it's interesting when you say that. So for the ones that are speed bumps, that are, they are there to slow me down, that has the opposite effect, actually, in some cases, where I take particular pleasure in going a little bit faster over them. Because you're absolutely right, it's my mini act of rebellion against the authority, and I'm like, screw you, which of course is not smart. I mean, it's dumb from me, but I'm just reacting to what's put in front of me.
Yeah.
So you said that you didn't think that was one of your more creative ones. I would disagree, because I think all the little bits you've talked about, there's all those little elements that I think, it adds up, and it's something. It doesn't sound like it's much, but I think there's a lot of little elements in there that they're just individually exciting, and you add the whole thing together, and I think it's a solid solution to a problem that I think has a back to playfulness.
When you will see what we do for Garbagenta, you will see it's much more creative.
Awesome! I can't wait to see the playbook. These, but like if we talk about sort of, are there other ones you can talk about that you think are more kind of creative that you would hold up?
So there are. Give me 1 second. I try to find one of them. If I have it here. So this is a plate.
Brilliant. So sadly, this is audio for the listeners, but I can see this.
I'm sorry.
But don't worry, no, it's good. I'm glad you got up to that. I can see this. I'll try and describe what I can see. But yeah, go on.
So this is a plate that we have invented for Nestlé. It's just a prototype, and it was never measured, etc. But this is really one idea that I love. There is one moment in the life of men and women, which is really important. It's when you are 2 or 3 years old and you are discovering new tastes, and especially vegetables. And if parents are successful into making their kids really like and enjoy vegetables, it will be for life. So for life, you will have men and women who love to eat broccolis and cauliflowers and peas, etc. And they will love it as much as French fries. So you can imagine the impact on worldwide obesity if we did that. And in fact, but if they fail, it will be the same. Men and women will hate vegetables probably for life. Maybe they will start again, etc., and some of them will succeed.
So it's a really interesting inflection point where you kind of go one way or the other.
It's really a moment of truth. And so when you are a parent, you really want your kids to love vegetables, so you are ready to invest. And in fact, it's not just what we proved is that, and it was the name of the plates. In fact, what we said to people, the plate is as important as what you put in the plate, which is normally you don't say that. But here it's really a plate that makes your kids love vegetables. So there was 4 decors. So there is one plate, which is a white plate, etc. And we had 4 3D decors. One of them, the one that I'm showing now is, it's a blue decor, and there is a plane, which is in 3D. So it's fun, etc. It's the plane which is ideal for cauliflowers. It's not cauliflowers anymore, it's clouds. And if the kid doesn't eat the clouds, how can you expect the plane to land safely? They don't see anything. So the kid needs, so suddenly it's a totally new experience. And you bring fun, you bring emotion, it's way more satisfying. So there is one other thing which is important that I didn't tell you. If you are stubborn enough when you are a parent, and you succeed into making your kids try between 7 and 10 times the vegetables, even if he doesn't like it the seventh first time, at the end of the day, he will like it. Because I won't explain why, but it's that there is lots of science on.
Right.
So the mission of the parents is, for every new vegetable that I try with my kid, I need at least to try, even if if he spits at me, etc. I need to continue. I need to try a 5th time, 6th time, 7th time, etc. And we need to help him. So we need the parents to be, when the kid is really hating the food, the parents feels sad because it's food which is spoiled, but it's a difficult mission for a parent to force a kid to do something which is not pleasant for him. So it's difficult psychologically. And so we invent a thing which makes it easy for parents because it's always fun. It's always exciting. And for the kid also, of course, the discovery is much more interesting. So we have come up with those plates, and each of the decor was coming with different recipes, because if the kid doesn't like the cauliflower the first time, you need to cook it a bit differently so that he doesn't think it's the same cauliflower he ate, and he tries, etc. So we had a set of different recipes for each vegetables, and of course a set of different stories. So we had 10 stories about planes lost in the world, in the sky, etc. And I think, unfortunately, it hasn't been tested, but I'm sure this is really one of those creative solutions that would be really effective. I would love IKEA to pitch IKEA for this with these plates. I'm sure there is something to do with that.
Wow! No, it looks a shame you can't see it, listeners, but it's great. It's fun. I can see that working because that's it's a beautiful visual thing.
Another story which is happening at the moment. So we are our biggest clients in our behavior change practice in Paris is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it's a long story, but I happened to be chosen as the lead of the Gates team working in Nepal to try to change the food behaviors of the country. When I say the food behaviors, we want, in fact, the whole Nepal to turn towards more nutritious products and especially fortified products, because there are lots of nutritional deficiencies, etc. And when I say the food behaviors of the whole country, it's the people, but it's also the industry. Because if we want to have people eat more fortified products, we need to have producers with us who produce more fortified products. So there is a supply and demand phase of the and what we so we start with one program which is dedicated to complementary feeding. So it's between 6 months of age and 24 months of age, and it's all the complement foods that you eat on top of breast milk, so that you are totally sure that the kid gets all the nutrients he needs to grow healthily. And it's another very critical part of the life of every man and woman on this planet. And so we worked with food partners to work on. There are two partners essentially. Eggs producers, because eggs is it has been proven to be really a great food to bring all those complementary nutrition that the kids need, and fortified porridge. So commercial brands of porridge, we worked with them to fortify the porridge, etc. But in fact, so when we want to change the behaviors, so we need to change the behaviors of the industry, because they need to believe in our products. They need to really agree that they can do something for making the new generation of Nepalese more healthy, etc. We need to change the mind of and the behaviors of the shopkeepers. Shopkeepers are very influential in Nepal, in the small villages, etc. It's what important people in Nepal. We need, of course, to change the behaviors of and attitudes of consumers. And in fact, we ended up by creating another social movement. So I'm sorry about social movement. This one is called Behavioural Nepal. So it means mighty Nepal. And the very first, so this program about trying to have parents give on a daily basis eggs or fortified porridge to their children. In fact, we created a platform, which is a creative platform. We are using and working, in fact, with the two captains of the national teams of cricket. We have a project which is called Balio 11. So you have 11 players in a cricket team. And in fact, the project is, and the objective of the project is to take the Nepal team, whether it is the feminine one or the masculine one, to be world champion of cricket in 2039, in 20 years. And the very first mission we have, if we want to be serious about becoming world champion, is to feed our kids properly so that they can grow healthily. Because if you don't have healthy boys and girls, we will never build a team of world champion. And so, in fact, there is a whole project which is so there is a lot of influence. We have celebrities with us. We have private sector partnerships. We are working with the people paid by the government to give to convey all the nutritional messages to women in the small communities. We are working with NGOs, but everything which is really, so there is a massive program of behavior change, but everything is united by one thing, which is really emotion, speaking to the heart of people, being exciting, being entertaining. And one of the things, for example, that we are working on at the moment, it's a radio drama. In fact, it's a series, so we are not on Netflix because we are on Nepal, so we work with radios, which is but it's really cool. But we are doing the same thing, which we are producing a series of 12 episodes of 30 minutes, and we are telling, in fact, the story that will take kids who are under 2s today to the final of the World Cup in 2039 against India, which is the big frenemy of Nepal. We will tell with Paras and Rubina, those captains. They are captains today, but tomorrow they will be coach, and they really want seriously to bring Nepal to be a world champion. So there is really a very creative way and emotional way, but at the same time there is a very scientific approach and theoretical. In fact, we are inventing a new theory of behavior change in Nepal, and this is another way to show how creativity and science can go together.
But I love that because it's sort of aspirational and positive and yeah, it's super engaging. And it's interesting, isn't it? Like, so we sort of look at radio on the one hand and go, yeah, it makes sense. But even in kind of, countries where everybody has televisions and their own screens, radio is still a super powerful medium, yes. As illustrated by podcasting. Yes. And I think there's something fascinating about that way of connecting people. Wow, I love those stories. That's just like what a lot of fun. And I think one of the things I think is great because it comes out in the way you talk about it is you're not sitting there clinically working this stuff out. It's like, how can I have fun while I'm doing this? Because if I get this right, this is going to work super effectively. And as you say, working with the Gates Foundation, I mean, talk about something timely and relevant to to the big issue. Yeah.
Well, this is also what is great about behavior change. In fact, you have lots of behaviors that we want to change, that governments, that companies want to change are really very serious, important behaviors. And even if I go back to Les Mureaux, what we did in Les Mureaux, it's a bit simple, etc. But I think we have contributed to make the quality of life of people around Les Mureaux a bit better. And it's really... it's quite satisfactory when you have the chance to work on those projects.
Except for the people who you've stopped peeing in their really convenient location. They've had to find somewhere else, obviously. Yes. But that's
But you know what? One day, because in fact the problem is that in France you don't have a sufficient enough offer of public places to urinate, and probably one day the mairie, the city of Les Mureaux will really take things seriously, and they will. They will build more public spaces for urinating, and the problem will be solved. Or maybe the other thing that we can hope is that education will change in France, and we will start to make boys understand that in fact they can be like girls. They can just either be a bit precautious before to go in the street. So you pee even if you don't feel like peeing, you pee before because you might be, or you retain yourself and you wait a bit more and everything will be okay. Women do it, so why not men?
Right. Listen, I think that's a great note on which to finish. Benoît, thank you so much for your time. That was a lot of fun, and I know my listeners are going to love it as well. I will put links to your video in the show notes so people can locate and watch that. And I'll put connection details for anybody in France who is interested in it, or anywhere, I guess, if anybody is interested in exploring these topics further with you. But thank you so much for being a brilliant guest and a lot of fun to talk to.
Thanks a lot, Christian. It was a pleasure.
So that's it for another episode of the Human Risk Podcast. My massive thanks to Benoît for appearing, and of course to you for listening. If you want to watch the video that we referred to during the show, you'll find that, plus a host of other links in the show notes. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast, you can find it wherever you get your quality audio content. It's on all the major podcasting platforms. If you had a moment to leave a review on the platform of your choice, that would be hugely helpful, allows other people to find the show, and means I can continue to attract high quality guests. I'll be back very soon for another episode, but if you're in need of more human risk content, do follow me on Twitter @HumanRiskBlog, and you can sign up for the Human Risk newsletter and check out the video channel. Links to both of those are also in the show notes. In the meantime, stay safe, and I'll see you very soon for another episode of the Human Risk Podcast.